Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're thrilled to have this opportunity to talk with you. This is one of a series of presentations and discussions and webinars that we've had with senior leadership across CPG, and it's actually the second in a specific series, which is basically to further illuminate our annual report. Our annual report goes out typically at the beginning of July. It's rather dense with information and numbers. Some of you may have looked at it and said, I still have questions, and have, for that reason, joined us today. Others may have looked at it and said, I'm not going there, and that this is just a much easier way to get information about CPG. But whatever your motivation for being here today, we're just thrilled to have you. We hope to bring a little more life to the numbers in our annual report, to talk about our investment process and portfolio, to talk about a number of other important operational initiatives we have around CPG, and to entertain your questions. And some of you have sent in questions ahead of time. We've attempted to weave answers to those questions into our various comments. Others of you will be asking questions as we go along, and we hope in one way or another, if not today, but in other presentations, publications, or even reaching out to you, that we'll be able to answer your questions. So I'm joined today by various senior leaders at CPG, as well as Kathryn McCormick, who is the new chair of our board of trustees. And Kathryn will talk to you a little bit about the work of the board along with management at CPG. So we're thrilled to have her, and I'm thrilled to be joined by all of my colleagues here today. So before we dig in, I'm going to ask my colleague Clayton Crawley, please, to start the meeting with prayer. Thank you, Clayton.
Thank you, Mary Kate. Today is November 14th, is the commemoration of the consecration of Samuel Seabury. So my opening prayer will conclude with the collect for the day. Let us pray. Most holy and living God, we ask your blessing on our time together as we discuss the work of the Church Pension Group. May that work be always to the benefit of your church and those who serve it. And on this day of commemoration, we give you thanks, O Lord our God, for the goodness in bestowing upon this church the gift of the episcopate. And we pray that, joining together in unity with our bishops and nourished by your holy sacraments, we may proclaim the gospel of redemption with apostolic zeal through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. I want to start by offering some introductions of the panel. And Kathryn, you gave us a really good watchword when I introduce folks. Wave in case they don't have the names of the folks on their screen. And I'm gonna start with Kathryn McCormick. And as Mary Kate said, she's our new board chair. She was elected after the last convention to that office on our board. She previously served as canon for administration and finance for the Diocese of Mississippi. So Kathryn was well known to us for many years, and we were thrilled to have her on the board, and now even more proud to have her as the chair of the board. She's a former Credo Finance faculty member and recently served as the president of Province 4 in the Episcopal Church. So welcome, Kathryn. Mary Kate Wold has served as CEO and president of CPG for more than 10 years. She also serves as the 25th member of the Board of Trustees. Prior to joining CPG, she was the senior finance executive and principal corporate officer of Wyeth, one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. And before this, she was partner and chaired the tax practice group of Sherman and Sterling, a leading global law firm. Earlier in her career, she served in the Office of Tax Policy of the United States Department of Treasury. Thank you for being here, Mary Kate. Next up is Frank Armstrong, who serves as Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. He has been with CPG since 2011. He's responsible for providing strategic leadership and direction for CPG's 3 lines of business. And before joining CPG, he served as managing principal and practice leader for the Eastern region of Hewitt Associates Health Management Practice and he served there as a lead consultant to CPG. So much like Kathryn, Frank has been known to CPG for a really long time. Prior to this, he was an actuarial consultant for Bulk Consultants and an actuary associate of the U.S. Life Insurance Company. Welcome, Frank. And I should tell everyone that Frank really enjoys a good actuary joke. Next up, we have Roger Saylor, who has been with CPG since 2014. He currently serves as Executive Vice President and Chief Investment Officer. He's responsible for overseeing our investment programs. And prior to CPG, he served as Chief Operating Officer at Columbia Management Group. Before that, he spent 20 years at JP Morgan Investment Management. Thank you for being here, Roger. And finally, but in no way least, we have Patty Favreau. She joined CPG in 2008 as Executive Vice President and Chief Communications Officer. She's responsible for CPG's communication, research, and web strategies. She also oversees institutional relationship management and the recorder of ordination functions that are assigned to CPF by the General Convention of the Episcopal Church. Prior to CPG, she served as president of Red Scout, a brand strategy, consulting, and product development firm, and also worked at New York Life as chief marketing officer of its U.S. life and annuity business. Welcome, Patty. Thank you all for joining us today. And I am Clayton Crawley, the Chief Church Relations Officer at the Fund. So I want to start by first saying to those who submitted questions in advance, thank you very much. We have woven those into our answers. But as we see questions coming in, we'll pick those up and either weave them into our answers or ask them towards the end. So thank you for your participation in advance and real time. My first question is to you, Mary Kate. For the uninitiated, can you summarize briefly the church pension group and the work that we do on behalf of the church?
Well, thank you, Clayton. I think I'll first just say a little bit about our history. We celebrated 5 years ago, we celebrated our 100th anniversary as an organization. And we were started in the early 1900s by Bishop William Lawrence from a very well-heeled family in Massachusetts who was really distraught that Episcopal clergy were retiring into poverty in many cases. And his audacious dream was that there would be a mandatory pension system for Episcopal clergy. He sought out to make that happen, and of course it did, and the rest is history, we would say. But our purpose at the kind of highest, most aspirational level is to support the clergy and lay employees of the church in their calling to spread the gospel. And our vision in that regard focused on, well, first of all, we execute that through 3 principal lines of business. And I'm going to ask Frank Armstrong to say a bit about each of those, or Clayton will ask him. And we're in the benefits business, which is absolutely our core, property and casualty insurance and publishing. And given that the benefits business is the core of what we do, our vision is that we can provide the highest level of financial security and retirement to our participants, both lay and clergy, while at the same time being financially responsible and also being attuned to the ongoing and evolving needs of the church. To do that, we have to have a repository of assets that enable our work. And our investment portfolio is the source of that. We find that we are paying out something like 4 or 5 times the amount of assessments that we get in from the church to fund our benefits. So it means that our investment portfolio really has to bear the brunt of the responsibility to support those payments that we make out to all of our participants. And to date, we've done a very good job doing that. But Roger is going to talk to you about some of the challenges and opportunities that we have as we invest the portfolio to be able to maintain the confidence that we've been able to engender in the church, that we're going to be there and be a stable presence for our clients now and going forward indefinitely. So thank you, Clayton.
Thank you, Mary Kate. And Roger, I'm going to pick up on Mary Kate's comments on the importance of the investment portfolio to all of the work that we do. And so the markets continue to be volatile. Can you talk about CPG's investment strategy and how your team manages our portfolio in good times and in bad?
Sure. So the investment strategy for the defined benefit plan starts with a strategic asset allocation, and that's a set of target allocations across asset classes for the very long term. And that also sets a risk profile for the overall fund as well, and ensures that the portfolio remains very diversified across asset classes, geographies, and various strategies that we invest in. And we stay focused on that strategic asset allocation over long periods of time, over good periods and bad periods. Now, from time to time, the portfolio deviate from those targeted asset allocations and that strategic long-term asset allocation, either due to the market's movements, where it can move away a little bit temporarily, or from time to time we make smaller tactical asset allocations at the margin a little bit. But that strategic asset allocation is really kind of the anchor to windward in terms of how we manage the overall asset allocation. Now, within that framework, right, we hire external investment managers to actually manage the money within each of those asset classes and for each asset class strategy that we employ. And the people that we hired are specialists in their field, and the process that we go through hiring them is pretty detailed, and we conduct a great deal of research on their investment capabilities and investment due diligence and what they do. That covers areas such as their investment philosophy, their investment process, the people they have on board and their experience and knowledge about the areas in which they invest, their historical performance record and how that has performed as one would expect it to, given what the strategy that they're employing, and also the characteristics of the resultant portfolio that they develop in their strategy. And that process has actually worked very well for us over many, many years, resulting in really a great lineup of investment professionals that are managing the underlying portfolios for the benefit of the beneficiaries. Now, as part of the overall investment process, we obviously have to focus on the risks of the portfolio as well. There's a couple of things we do along those lines. One of the first and maybe most important one is we do a stress testing each year on the financial status of the whole plan, if you will, whole DB plan. And we look at how both the assets and the liabilities associated with the pension plan will evolve over many years into the future. The assets obviously fluctuate, and the liabilities also can fluctuate because of changes in liability assumptions, inflation, and things of that nature. And we look at that over many different scenarios, taking into account both the expected return of the different asset classes, the volatilities, their correlations with each other, et cetera. And that analysis actually gives us a good indication as to the status, the health status of the overall pension plan when you include not only the assets, but you also include the liabilities of the pension plan as well. And the conclusion from that type of work that we do again this year was that the financial status of the clergy plan was solid, but still in a caution, what we would call a cautionary zone. Another risk that we focus on is liquidity risk, and we also do stress testing there. Obviously, we need to have the cash on hand when it's needed to pay pension beneficiaries and also to meet our investment commitments, if you will. In that process, we look at different points in time marching out into the future to look at the sources of cash that we're going to have available at those points in time, and also the potential needs for cash in those different points in time, and make sure that the sources that are going to be available to us at each of those points in time is sufficient to meet those needs. And so that's a second example of some of the risk management tools that we use to monitor and evaluate the risk of the portfolio. The last topic I'll just talk on very briefly is obviously the markets, as was said, has been very volatile this year, and well, for a number of years it seems now. And of course, when markets are volatile, meaning in some cases they're down a lot, we are going to be impacted by those declines in the markets. But the portfolio's broad diversification I mentioned before when I talked about asset allocation helps to mitigate the impact of a down market on the overall portfolio. As a side note, I should mention also that when there's a lot of volatility in the markets, particularly when the markets are down a lot, and there's a lot of stresses in the markets, that can actually create a lot of good investment opportunities for us. So there is a kind of a silver lining, if you will, inside those environments where the markets are very volatile and stresses seem to be arising. During recent times, however, the portfolio has performed quite well. As a result, over the last 3, 5, and 10 years, the DB portfolio has performed very well, exceeding its benchmarks after all management fees over all three of those time periods, the 3, 5, and 10-year period. One example would be over 10 years, the portfolio's rate of return annualized is compounded at about 9.4% per year. And it's actually been slightly higher than that over 3 years and over 5-year time periods. So that gives you a sense of the performance record, as well as some of the ideas with regard to how we're managing the overall portfolio. So with that quick update, I'll turn it back to Clayton.
Thank you, Roger. And so I'm going to now go back over to Mary Kate, and Roger, being our expert on things investments and financial. Sometimes being a clergy person like myself, we can get lost in the answer, but there's one question that I think can be primary among some of our beneficiaries, and I'll ask that to you, Mary Kate. Should our clients be worried about the effects of the market that have on the portfolio, and will these declines in a negative, volatile market impact their pension payments?
Well, let me say that I sleep well at night knowing that Roger and his team are doing the good work that they do. And so, as Roger said, we are in a cautionary mode, meaning that we believe that we have the assets that we need to cover the liabilities that we have now and significantly into the future, but we're not in a position to increase benefits, reduce assessments, whatever, without really kind of rethinking the approach. But right now, we think we're in very solid position. And when Roger talks about his team meeting their benchmarks, they do that consistently. And what do we mean by meeting benchmarks? Our benchmarks are really focused on what would a more passive portfolio do if you just put our investments and took them away from this team and gave them to a Vanguard or something of the sort. Then how would we look? And our team consistently outperforms and shows that the value that they bring to CPG and to our clients is really phenomenal. So I think it's a very disciplined team. It's a team that takes a lot of different risks into account, does not react to either ups or downs in the market in any dramatic way, but just keeps a steady course. And that saw us through the Great Depression in the 30s. It saw us through the Great Financial Crisis over a decade ago. It saw us through March of 2020 when valuations plummeted, and it's seen us through the volatility today. So with many different market scenarios, we have weathered the storm, and I have no doubt that we'll continue to do that with the terrific and experienced team that we have.
Thank you, Mary Kate. So Frank, I'm going to turn it over to you. Mary Kate prefigured you oversee CPG's 3 lines of businesses. And can you tell us how those businesses respond to the financial pressures? So kind of tying it all together. We've got businesses to work. We're in a volatile market situation, but how do we continue to do our work in our businesses in that environment?
Sure, Clayton. So our businesses are certainly not immune to the volatility that Roger and Mary Kate have been speaking to, and those resulting financial pressures. That said, for us, volatility really is the norm. We operate businesses where volatility risk is the nature of what we look at, and we're very purposeful in managing our capital positions to withstand those pressures. So Mary Kate and Roger were talking about how we manage the asset liability modeling of our defined benefit pension plan. We follow that same robust financial discipline across all of our businesses. So we're always making sure that we're paying attention to both the asset side and the liability side to make sure that we have the appropriate amount of capital to withstand these financial pressures. So I'll just reiterate, what Mary Kate said. We remain confident that we can meet our financial commitments across our 3 businesses, but we're currently operating in what we define as a cautionary mode. So we're really keeping our eye on sort of this, I would say, current financial condition and some forecasts that we may be in this some period of time in the extended future where returns are a little bit lower than we've enjoyed in the past, and inflation remains volatile or high. So what that means is it's pressure on both sides. It's pressure, lower assets all equal, and then higher liabilities. Not the best thing you want when you're trying to run a business, but that's how we operate, and we're always looking at that. And just some examples of the liability side in our businesses. So healthcare is a key part of our business, and you see with healthcare inflation, you don't have to open up a newspaper lately to see all the pressures on the hospital systems and kind of work they're trying to do to mitigate their costs. But with labor supply in general, we're going to continue to see upticks in that, which just means all else equal, annual claims are going to be higher for the same services than they were yesterday, and that sort of thing. Property casualty, we just recently experienced Hurricane Ian, which was a significant event for us in the church. It was, we're talking over $20 million of an event there. And again, all else equal, it's going to cost more to repair all the damage that Ian caused and other sorts of things. So on publishing, it's printing shortages. So these are the things that we're looking at as we take an overall look at our businesses. Even though the financial markets and economic conditions are generally unfavorable, it just tells us that we got to keep to our knitting, that we just keep focused on, what do we need to do to operate our businesses with robust financial discipline, that we manage both the assets and the liability side of the equation so that we're smart about the decisions we make, and do what we can, pull the levers that we can to sort of minimize the liability that allows us time to recover from these unfavorable financial markets and events.
Thank you, Frank. I admit it. I now have our theme song of Under Pressure. You can choose the David Bowie or the Queen version, but that was and it is who we are and what we do. And I think we strive to always have grace under pressure. So thank you for leading that team. I want to shift to our board chair, Kathryn. And as the new chair of the CPG board, describe for us the role of the board and its relationship to the CPG management team.
Thank you, Clayton. And to pick up on what Frank was talking about, I think one of the responsibilities during these volatile times is to hold up the management team, and so to support them. But we are walking with them also. We are involved in major policy issues. We approve the budget and we review the budget regularly. We also work with the management team on our committees. Much of our work is done in committees, and then that work is brought to the board. But all of the leadership team works with their areas to help set agenda and to bring that information and that line of work to the board. We also are constantly looking at the financial stability of the fund and making sure that we are being fiscally responsible to our beneficiaries, and that we are supporting the management in their work, but just to review. And that's one of the reasons we need such expertise on the board.
And so, Kathryn, talk to me about the relationship with CPG board and the broader church. So you talked about the management team, and now facing the broader church.
Right. Well, by canon, the board of trustees are elected by general convention. The general convention elects 12 board members, and 24 board members. And if, as was mentioned, Mary Kate is our 25th. But we're not only bringing our expertise in certain areas, we're bringing our church relationship to the board. The board and management is constantly listening to the church. Whenever there's a new policy that the board is considering, we test it out on beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries. And I'll mention here, we're also talking to the treasurers and the administrators who work in the church, because they work closely with CPG and their input is vital. So we're really bridging the gap between the person in the pew, for instance, and management and the board. And so because we are active in church, we're able to bring that relationship to the board.
Absolutely. And Kathryn, you've been very, you've kept us aware of this, being a former diocesan administrator, and you keep that in front of us, and that bridge to the wider church, our beneficiaries, also our diocesan churches. So I want to thank you for continuing that, leading the board.
Thank you.
Over to you, Patty Favreau. So you're responsible for the communications of CPG. And we've talked, Kathryn is a great representative of the board. Mary Kate is a board member, but oftentimes we need to better communicate what it is that we need in a board member. So tell us, how do you pick that up and carry it forward?
Well, thank you, Clayton. So as Mary Kate mentioned, our purpose, just really fundamentally, is to serve the clergy and lay employees of the Episcopal Church in their calling to spread the gospel. And the only way that works is if clergy and lay employees and everybody who has a vested interest in the church pension group understands who we are and what we do. So transparency is the #1 goal. And it's not really just about who should serve on the board. It really is, we're trying to reach vestry. We're trying to reach bishops. We reach lay employees, treasurers, clergy, everyone who depends on the church pension group to provide benefits, property and casualty insurance, or interested in purchasing some of our publishing materials, needs to know who we are and what we do. So we are constantly communicating with anyone who might be interested in the church pension group. We have just a great relationship with Episcopal News Media. We do our own communicating. We have a newsletter that we send out called CPG Connect. We have the annual report, which has a lot of numbers in it. People ask us about our financials, and they are reported annually and audited in our annual report. But it's not just thick text with numbers. We actually tell stories to help people understand the impact of our work and why we matter to help people. I think it's easy and tempting to see us as a bundle of money, but what we really are is a community of concern, and we use money that has been entrusted to us to generate benefits for the Episcopal Church. We take our jobs incredibly seriously. So we use social media, we use newsletters, we use email, we use forums like this to share the good news of the work that we do, and also to collect some feedback, some really constructive, sometimes hard to hear, but necessary to hear feedback. And so that's where everybody who's participating on this webinar and anyone you know can help, because we do our best to broadcast all of the information we know, but it has to be informed by concerns that people around the church have. So we also do whatever we can to encourage people to ask us questions, to give us an opportunity to hear concerns, to track trends, so that we can be as responsive as we can be.
Thank you, Patty. And it really is a kind of a joint task to not only get the word out there so it can be apprehended, but also once it's there, to react to it. And we really do take seriously the feedback that we get. When we ask a question, we listen, and you can see the results internally. So thank you for leading that charge. Now I'm going to go back to Kathryn, because we're really, as you can tell, we're really focused on leadership and all of the aspects of leadership. And we've talked about the board a couple of times. And Kathryn, we welcomed 7 new trustees at the last convention. They're going to be coming up for re-election, 6 additional spots at the next convention. So what do you see the skills that are represented currently on the board that are important, and what skills do we need to look for as a board and an institution from the church in potential board members?
Thank you for that. And this is very important to the board. As I mentioned, we are fiduciaries of the fund, and it's vital that we have the right expertise. As soon as we welcome our new trustees, we also look at who we will be losing in the next general convention. We've mentioned we are in 3 lines of business: benefits, property and casualty, and publishing. Certainly, we need expertise in this area, but we also need strong investment advisors. We need CPAs, attorneys, and you don't have to have worked in the church forever to be qualified for this. The Joint Nominating Committee will be soliciting nominations, and nominate yourself. If you know of a church or a diocesan treasurer who has these qualifications and expertise, encourage them to be nominated, because that's the pool we'll be pulling from. We've lost in the class that will be retiring in 24, we'll lose strong investment strategists. We'll lose attorneys. We'll lose someone who is running a large nonprofit organization who has expertise in human resources. So we would like to reach out to everyone. If you know of someone, encourage them to put their name in, because we do vital work. We always have our beneficiaries in mind, but we need the right skills to enhance who will be continuing on the board.
Thank you, Kathryn. And one of the things you might, I think it is important also that board members serve with 2 terms who are with us for over a decade. And they offer really long-term guidance and insight for the fund. So very critical to the leadership of the fund. And so having a broad skill set is super important. Frank, I'm going to tee you up here. So talk about the work that CPG is doing to help the church better understand issues about pension parity, because that's been in front of the church and in front of us for a number of years. So some comments on what pension parity, how we manage it, what we have in mind, and what our plans are.
Nice, Clayton. I thought you were going to ask me as the actuary to help you count the number of trustees that we just had, again, between 6 and 7 there. So you got that one almost right. But with pension parity, as Patty said before, one of the key ways that we are supporting the church and continue to do that is by leveraging, the data that we collect, the knowledge that we have, and then the relationships and conversations that we're out and about talking to church. So we pull that together with the goal of providing information back, turning all that into information back to the church. And on this, significant topic of pension parity and then broader compensation parity, we're focused on turning that information into, 1, what are those disparities that exist? 2, let's get into some of the root causes, at least that we can see from the data and some of those conversations, and then tee up some potential considerations that the church may want to consider as the church wrestles with how do we address this complex topic. So we had a general convention, I guess 4 or 5 years ago now, asked us to do a couple reports. There's a couple different resolutions, and we have published 2 reports. One was on the pension parity between clergy and lay employees, and then the second was more broadly. It was focused on compensation and really looking at broader disparities in compensation, including gender, race, ethnicity, and that sort of thing. So I'm not going to get into the details of those, but people can find them. They're on our website. If you go to the newsroom section of that, they're on there. But I do want to touch on a few key findings. And first, back to that question of, well, where do disparities exist? We've combed through all that data and those conversations, and there's two main areas that we see of they're most evident in disparities, and one that is between clergy and lay employees when it comes to pension parity. And then when we look at clergy and dive deeper, it's gender, it's male and female. Now we've dug into a lot of other different things, in terms of geography. Compensation varies widely, based on geography, size of church, parish, sort of thing, where people are called and where they're positioned. That impacts things on race and ethnicity. At least the data that we've collected right now, it doesn't show large disparity in that compensation, but we do see, as we're looking at pensions and the amount of savings that white clergy have versus people of color, that there is a material difference in that. So it points to, anyway, the ability to have other disposable income to help save for retirement. So if you look at our reports and some of the data that we put out on our annual compensation, a lot of that now is sort of point and click stuff. You can dig it a little bit deeper in terms of what are some of those underlying areas for us to look further at. And then in the reports, we also talk about what does that mean in terms of retirement income, especially when we look at the broader disparities in compensation, because compensation is a key factor in all of our pension plans, whether it's defined benefit or defined contribution. So there's disparities that exist in active ministry. They're going to extend all else equal into retirement income, and sometimes they're exacerbated based upon what plan they're in. So if you look at our reports, we kind of just lay out, so the clergy pension plan, what is in there. There are some very purposeful things that the trustees have approved over the years to help address some of that disparity when it comes to retirement income. And those same features are not in the lay defined benefit plan. Now, the lay defined benefit plan is a much smaller plan, and most employers have chose to offer the defined contribution plan. But if you're just looking at defined benefit plans, there's differences in those features. And, we get questions a lot around the annual cost of living adjustment, and that hits people right in the face around that. Feels like lack of parity. And those are facts, in terms of what these plans are able to deliver, and the asset position, as we've been talking about, and how we manage things. The lay DB plan is just not in an asset position, especially at these times, that we can say we can keep adding to that liability and still say that we are confident that we can keep paying pension checks to those beneficiaries. So it's not the answer that a lot of people like to hear, but right now we need to be prudent and financially responsible for these decisions. And we talk about it all the time with the trustees in terms of, this is what we have in front of us and what can these plans afford to do. But it does come up in these conversations around parity. And those are some things that are right kind of in front of people's faces. Now, on the lay defined contribution plan, which, most of the employers offer now, that also, there's a lot of good things with the defined contribution plan where you accumulate savings over your working career. That's great, but it also sort of exacerbates, income disparity in active versus retirement, because I have more money today than somebody else. I should be able to save more and accumulate more over time. So those are some of the realities of what is baked into pension plans in general. And for the most part, disparities in income will carry through to retirement, and we do what we can there. So if you go into those reports, you'll see we highlight those differences, and we point to not only those differences, but some considerations where the church may say, well, what is the appropriate and affordable level of both the cost of these plans for employers to be able to afford, and then the resulting benefits that are going to be delivered when clergy and lay employees retire. So we will continue to support, and we're happy to continue to provide our data, our experience, our knowledge in terms of, hey, here's what we got in front of us to help the church kind of wrestle and have these discussions and maybe some decisions around how to address pension parity.
Thank you, Frank. And I want to pick up on one other parity item that came up. And whereas the those pension parity questions that you described there, some of them are very systemic, and we work towards those. One of the things that came up at the last convention is an issue of parity on short-term disability benefits for clergy versus lay. Could you pick that up and just describe what we did in response to that?
Sure. This was the ask, or what was identified as a source of disparity, was in a short-term disability plan. How much time does a member have when they have a child, and how much time will the short-term disability benefit provide in a maternity leave? And again, since that short-term disability benefit for clergy that are in the pension plan, that's a part of our overall what the 18% sort of buys. We have some flexibility in terms of defining that, and that had more time than your standard what's available in an insured product on the marketplace. So that was brought up in general convention, and we've had discussions. We were involved in discussions before that, and there was a resolution that encouraged CPG to make that available, to kind of address that, and at least have employers make that decision whether they want to buy more for that longer amount of time. And so we were able to do that. We were able to act fast and have that ready, coming right out of the gates, because we were involved in the conversations. We did our work with the vendors that we deal with, and it does cost more money if you want to buy that, but at least now that's out there, and it's something that employers can make that decision in terms of addressing that one sort of piece of disparity that was clearly the case before 1/1/2022 that we made available now.
Absolutely.
2023.
See, you're going to get on. I'm going to give you a hard time for counting as well now. So that is one of those things that when we are often faced as a complex fund, we're often faced with problems that take a long time to solve. I thought that was just such a great story of we heard about it, we were asked to respond, and we responded in months. And now that's available. And so we were very glad to be able to do that. And so Frank, thanks to you and your team for doing that. And now I want to stay with General Convention, and we're often asked to do things from one General Convention for another General Convention. And Mary Kate, I'm going to hand that over to you. So talk about some of the work that General Convention has asked CPG to do before the next gathering in 2024.
Well, before I talk to some specifics, just let me just say that every General Convention, there are probably 100 or more potential resolutions that have some connection to CPG, whether it's our benefits business, our property and casualty business, our publishing business, and we follow all of them. So for those of you who are involved in General Convention and all of the online hearings that were going on for months and months and months leading up to General Convention, there was rarely a hearing that some of us were not involved in, listening, adding our expertise when asked and such. So it's a huge lift for us to keep up with all of the things that General Convention may be interested in that intersect somehow with our work. And we're grateful for that as well, and grateful to be allowed to be kind of part of that process. There were so many, as I said. I think, Clayton, I'll just touch on a couple of things. One was uniform paid family leave, and General Convention has struggled for a while with an equitable approach to paid family leave for people who work in the church, both clergy and lay employees. We worked extensively with a committee between the last two General Conventions to look at options, and with the unfortunate conclusion that there are just not insurance products in the market and such at this point that will cover paid family leave. So to the extent that it's covered, parishes really have to do that kind of out of pocket through their vacation policies and that sort of thing. General Convention this time around adopted a policy to say that parishes and dioceses should adopt policies so that they're ready to go when something finally hits the market. So I dare say that we'll be helping monitor that and bringing kind of our intelligence to the churches as things develop. Probably not fast enough for anyone's druthers, but we'll certainly be there to help interpret and alert people as things come on our radar screen. The second thing is, and there have been some questions about how we invest and how we reconcile the views of the church with our investing. And we were asked by the 2018 General Convention to produce a sustainability report. And we work closely with committees of General Convention on issues of socially responsible investing. And that's an area in which we're passionate. And as a highly regulated organization with our own distinct mission to provide robust benefits to our participants and to give them security in retirement, we are not allowed to compromise returns in our portfolio for any reason. So we work very hard to marry church values with our own fiduciary responsibilities and our own really amazing and honorable and noble mission to serve those who serve the church. So we have an approach to socially responsible investing that is very intentional. It's a 4-pronged strategy. One is to seek out those investments, positive impact investments that actually do have the most competitive returns, but still have a focus on doing some social or environmental good. The second is shareholder engagement, to engage with public companies in our portfolio to encourage them to operate their businesses in ways that are aligned with the values of the church. And we collaborate significantly with the CCSR on that committee of Executive Council. The third area is ESG incorporation. As we look across our portfolio and due diligence on companies, we analyze environmental, governance, and social issues that are relevant to those particular investments. And then lastly, thought leadership. We convene lots of groups. Please join some of our insights and ideas panels where we bring thought leadership to the church in areas of socially responsible investing. We sit on many global committees on environmental and social issues across the world and collaborate with other faith-based investors. When we find good ideas in the impact investing area, we try to attract other capital, including other faith-based capital to those ideas, but we try to be a real catalyst and use the intelligence that we've gained in this work to do that. So in terms of the last General Convention, people read our report and they said, update it, bring us another one. So we'll be working on that too for the next General Convention. And then the last thing I want to highlight, which is a very important resolution to me, the General Convention passed, which is to put together a task force, a working group that will include a member of our board, a member of our staff, will include members of Executive Council and bishops and so on, a broad representation across the church to take another look at the DHP. Is it the best that it can be? Are there ways that we can improve it? And I think this is a fantastic approach because every year, every General Convention, there are lots of questions, there's lots of testimony, but very little time to digest it, very little time to get a cross-representation, very little time to bring a real fact-based analysis in a very fast-moving convention. So I think allowing ourselves this couple of years with the church to sit down, educate the church as to how we're thinking about it, get input, see if there are tweaks that can be made to improve it. Healthcare is just frustrating because it is expensive. No matter what we can do, it's going to be expensive, and to have all the best thinking in the church to help us address it, I think is a wonderful thing. So kudos to the committee or committees at General Convention that worked on this, and we're really eager to get that process going and to get started.
Thank you, Mary Kate. And it turns out that there's one person on this call that's going to serve on that denominational health plan task force, and that's Frank Armstrong. So Frank, talk to us about the denominational health plan, and also if you have some time to talk about the group Medicare Advantage for our retirees as well, just how CPG is managing healthcare moving forward.
I think there's two of us that are on the task force. I think Kathryn's on there as well. So
Oh, right. Kathryn, sorry about that.
And I think you've both been offered up, so decisions have to be made,
Right.
but these are really fantastic informed volunteers.
Yes. So, no, thanks, Clayton. I guess I would start with just, a reminder of CPG's role in the denominational health plan, and that is to administer the plan that the church wanted and made the decision back in 2009, and do in a way that meets the objectives that were defined back then, which was, was sort of threefold: control costs, then, reduce cost disparities among dioceses, and do that in a way that still provides equal access to comprehensive benefits and broad access to hospitals and doctors, and then provide meaningful choice in doing so. So as Mary Kate said, it's not an easy task. And healthcare in general is expensive, but the DHP has met those objectives. And in all of our study and analysis, it remains the most cost-effective way to deliver healthcare to the entire church. That's why large employers do it the same way, really looking for scale and opportunities to address the unique needs of their populations. So, we were able to, the DHP was able to remove costs initially come out of the gates, and we've been able to manage costs, 2 or 3% below annually, below other trends. So it saves, all else equal, a couple $100 million for the church. But it's expensive. Healthcare is expensive. And I think what's in front of us now, it's been this way, and I think it will continue to be. It's very complex. It's an emotional topic. And it's sort of that discussion around, well, competitiveness versus affordability. And, we're going to share data that shows to the task force, well, what's the current state, and what is the denominational health plan delivering? What do we expect it to deliver? How does it compare to other potential options in the marketplace? So as Mary Kate said, it's sort of based on just facts and figures, like here's what we're looking at. And then also address the concerns around, is it affordable? Is it affordable in its current state? How long can the church continue to offer comprehensive benefits, broad access? And, how long is that sustainable or affordable, especially for the church where average age is 52 of clergy and lay employees in the plan? So these are the tough things that we're wrestling with. We will continue to, and with the task force, we'll bring that information to bear. We'll share our expertise and other resources just around, well, what are the other emerging things that are happening in the healthcare landscape, and then start at least quantifying or discussing, well, what are the impacts? If there's desire to do something else, well, what are those trade-offs? And what does that mean, so that the church can make a really informed decision? As Mary Kate said, is the current model something to keep doing in its current state? Is it an entirely different model, or is it a model that is adjusted to meet the change, to meet these needs, which are, largely financial? I think most of the church is saying, hey, I would love to keep doing this if it's affordable. And it's really that sort of conversation around, well, what is affordable? I agree with Mary Kate. This is great that this will give us some time to get together and really pull all this stuff and have these discussions, so that we come to at least the next general convention with a lot of that deep discussion with the task force, kind of pulling it apart and be able to bring back, well, here's what we're kind of getting our arms around. Oh, and then you said on the Medicare Advantage, the group Medicare Advantage for retirees. Yeah, this is something, the decision that we made and the trustees approved probably, in the middle of summer last year, so that we could implement in the beginning of 1/1/2022. And for those that are not as close to it, this is something that we've been following for a long time. In the broader retiree medical landscape, Medicare Advantage plans have been around for a while, and we made the decision early on that we didn't want to be a leader in this space. We actually didn't even want to be a fast follower. We wanted to see how's this playing out in the broader retired population. It is now the main way that healthcare is delivered, and we moved in this direction, even though there were considerable cost savings to retirees and participants, we were able to drop the cost basically in half. That wasn't the key reason we moved in this direction. It was because these plans are now mature and we can bring more benefits to our participants, retired clergy and lay that are in the plans, to have better experiences. We do think there will be better outcomes, bring more tools and resources. One example is the Medicare Advantage allows us to cover house visits, so home visits. And we've had through June, so the first half of the year, close to 2,000 home visits where doctors are coming in and able to find things right away, nurses or other practitioners. And, we already have testimonials of those things happening, not covered by standard Medicare, and that understanding that it's changed. And we spend a lot of time, and we know that, again, healthcare is an emotional topic. We spend a lot of time communicating, here's what's coming and here's why. And I guess the other thing I'll say is that this is still a group plan. We are still the administrator and sponsor of this plan. And, you'll continue to see, we'll see how this thing goes in the broader, market. We're going to continue to stay on top of it. And so far, we're getting a lot of good impact. a lot of good feedback in terms of the reasons why you put it out there. And when there are some issues, we address them.
Thank you, Frank. I think it really is, that you just demonstrate the level of care that we use to approach all of our medical plans, and both for active and retirees. So it's good work and it's hard work. So thank you for it. Mary Kate, in the couple of minutes that we have left before we wind up, closing words for us, and just give us a summary, and I'll wrap us up right by one.
Well, thank you. I do want to answer a couple of easily answered questions that have been coming up in the Q&A. And one is, people are asking, what is the COLA decision? And there is not one yet. We as a board make a decision on COLA in December. And then at our December meeting, which I believe is the second week in December, Kathryn, and that will be immediately communicated. Patty's communication team and is poised to get communications out as soon as we make a decision. But that is board action. It's discretionary every year, depending on whether the fund can afford a COLA and what level of COLA. So you will be hearing from us later on that. The second thing is, and it was an interesting question, and that is the board compensated? And the answer is no, the board is not compensated for board activities. They are a group of very hardworking volunteers. So kudos to all of the board for all of the work that they put in, not only learning the organization, but then bringing oversight and guidance to CPG. So I want to mention that. And I just see that we're out of time. So I also want to thank all of you for coming, for taking an hour out of your day to be with us. We truly appreciate it and are delighted to have you with us today. And Clayton, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Mary Kate. And I want to also offer my thanks to all of you who joined today and the questions that were submitted. This webinar was recorded, and so it's going to appear on our YouTube channel later this week, along with our website. Please follow us on social media, get all that really great content that Patty was pointing to earlier. And on December 5th, we have an Insight and Ideas, which focuses specifically on social responsible investing. And we will have the past chair of the Committee on Corporate Social Responsibility and with us, talking about our shareholder engagement activities. So thank you once again. There were many questions that we didn't get to. As I said earlier, what we do is we gather those, we respond to them. For those who we have a name, we'll reach out to you directly, and it will be become part of our warp and weft. So we thank you for those questions. So this afternoon, I bid you farewell. And again, a word of thanks from Church Pension Group to each of you. Bye-bye.